In an unassuming courtroom on April 2, 2025, a legal battle quietly unfolded that would ripple through the landscape of American healthcare, highlighting the tension between reproductive health rights and state authority. At the center of this drama was Medina versus Planned Parenthood South Atlantic, a case that would ultimately redefine how Medicaid beneficiaries could challenge state exclusions of healthcare providers. By June 26, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered a ruling that clarified the limits of individual legal action under federal law. This decision raised profound questions about who controls access to reproductive care: the individual, the state, or the federal government. The case began in South Carolina, where Governor Henry McMaster issued an executive order directing the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services to exclude clinics that provide abortion services, specifically Planned Parenthood South Atlantic, from participating as Medicaid providers. Importantly, Medicaid-funded services at these clinics did not include abortion due to federal law restrictions, but the clinics offered a wide range of essential healthcare services, from cancer screenings to contraceptive care, serving a substantial number of Medicaid patients. When the state cut off contracts and funding, Planned Parenthood and a Medicaid patient filed suit, arguing that the Medicaid Act's free choice of provider provision guaranteed the right to choose any qualified provider and allowed patients to enforce that right through federal court. At issue was whether Medicaid's statutory language, which permits beneficiaries to select any qualified provider, created a private right of action under federal law. Nevertheless, the practical consequences for patients are significant. Medicaid beneficiaries in South Carolina and, honestly, beyond, may now face situations where their preferred or nearest provider is excluded from the Medicaid network. This restriction could, force patients to travel longer distances, wait for appointments, or face gaps in coverage despite the federal requirement that states ensure access to necessary care. By denying a private right of action, the court limited the ability of individuals to challenge such exclusions, leaving oversight primarily in the hands of federal regulators. The dissenting justices, led by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, warned of the real-world consequences of the ruling, emphasizing that it could result in tangible harm to Medicaid patients by limiting access to qualified providers. The dissent highlighted how the decision could undermine civil rights protections in healthcare, emphasizing that while the law ostensibly remains unchanged, the practical enforcement of patients' rights is, severely curtailed. Medina versus Planned Parenthood illustrates a broader theme in the post-Roe reproductive healthcare landscape. The ongoing battle over access extends beyond abortion to include essential services like contraception, prenatal care, cancer screenings, and STI testing. So, the case really underscores that the everyday realities of reproductive health access are, deeply entwined with legal interpretations, state policy, and administrative discretion. For providers, the ruling signals increased operational vulnerability. Clinics may face exclusion from state Medicaid programs due to political or ideological considerations rather than medical performance, which threatens financial stability and limits service availability, especially in underserved areas. For patients, particularly those in rural regions or with limited mobility, the decision could translate into fewer accessible options for critical health services. This could force folks to rely on fewer providers or require them to travel to distant facilities. The ruling also raises some important questions about the enforcement of civil rights in healthcare. The Supreme Court emphasized that the Medicaid statute does not create an enforceable private right of action for individual patients, but it does not eliminate the underlying requirement for states to provide access to qualified providers. This distinction shifts the burden of enforcement from individuals to regulatory agencies, potentially creating gaps in accountability. Ultimately, Medina versus Planned Parenthood is, a turning point in understanding the balance between federal statutory protections and state power. It reflects a judicial perspective that, prioritizes clear statutory language over broader interpretations of patient rights, effectively reshaping the mechanisms by which individuals can assert control over their healthcare choices. The ruling may not immediately change service availability, but it establishes a precedent that could, over time, influence how states administer Medicaid programs across the country, especially regarding providers that offer reproductive and preventive healthcare. This case also highlights the complex interaction between law, healthcare policy, and, honestly, everyday life. patients may not notice the legal subtleties until they experience barriers to accessing care. Clinics must navigate both regulatory and political environments to maintain funding, and state authorities have greater latitude to implement policies that reflect local governance priorities. The outcome really emphasizes the importance of advocacy, patient awareness, and the ongoing role of federal oversight to ensure equitable access to healthcare services. Medina versus Planned Parenthood serves as a reminder that, legal interpretation really shapes practical outcomes in healthcare just as much as legislation or policy debates do. It demonstrates how the enforcement or, honestly, the lack thereof of statutory provisions can influence access to critical services, impacting millions of Medicaid beneficiaries all across the country. As states take a closer look at provider networks and funding priorities, the ruling kind of underscores the fragility of patient choice in systems where administrative discretion is pretty expansive and judicial enforcement is, limited. The case's implications definitely extend beyond just South Carolina. Other states might take note, exploring the boundaries of Medicaid provider exclusions and figuring out which clinics can participate in state programs without risking legal challenges from patients. It really represents a shift in strategy for managing healthcare networks, putting more emphasis on administrative control rather than individual enforcement. For reproductive health providers and advocates, this is both a cautionary tale and a call to action. Making sure access to care now depends not only on clinical standards, but also on ongoing engagement with policy and regulatory frameworks. In the final analysis, Medina versus Planned Parenthood highlights the delicate balance between state authority, federal law, and individual rights in the context of healthcare access. It reminds us that the day-to-day realities of reproductive healthcare are shaped not only by legislation and political debate, but also by judicial interpretation and administrative discretion. While the court maintained the statutory language of Medicaid intact, the ruling narrows the avenues through which individuals can defend their healthcare choices, demonstrating how the structure of legal remedies can profoundly affect the delivery of essential services. Patients, providers, and policymakers alike are now navigating a landscape in which access to reproductive and preventive healthcare may hinge more on state discretion than individual legal action. The ruling reinforces the importance of monitoring Medicaid policies supporting clinics that serve vulnerable populations and advocating for mechanisms that ensure meaningful access to care. It is a stark reminder that the interplay between law, policy, and healthcare outcomes is not abstract. It directly shapes the services people can receive and the choices they can exercise in safeguarding their health. If this deep dive into Medina versus Planned Parenthood helped you understand the stakes for reproductive health access and the balance of power between states and patients, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Share this with someone who cares about healthcare rights. Because, honestly, staying informed is the first step toward ensuring that access remains protected for everyone.